Good evening and thanks for joining us. We have lots to get to tonight, including how outbreaks of COVID-19 in long-term care homes are out of control in some places, especially Quebec and Ontario. But we begin with exclusive new information about the mass murder in Nova Scotia. 22 people were killed when a gunman went on a rampage over the weekend. The RCMP have not released a timeline or much detail about the chaotic 14 hours or so between when the first call came in until the gunman was shot and killed. But our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stephenson, is hearing some exclusive details from her sources. Mercedes, what can you tell us?
Well, Donna, we're getting a little bit of a picture of what happened that night before the gunman's rampage. He and his girlfriend attended a party that was just down the street from where his cottage was in Portapique. At that party, I am told that they got into an argument. Both left at some point and went back to his cottage. At that point, he escalated and became violent with his girlfriend. He assaulted her, and then he proceeded to tie her up. Luckily, Donna, she managed to escape and run into the woods. After that, at some point, the gunman goes out with a number of firearms, and he begins shooting people, including at the house where the party was held. Then there's a bit of a black hole. We don't know what comes next, but the next thing that we learn that is at 7 a.m. the next day, the RCMP find the gunman's girlfriend. She has been hiding, and she is able to give them critical information that changes, frankly, the entire scope of the investigation and how they're looking for him. She reveals to them that he is likely dressed as a police officer and driving an extremely realistic car that looks just like an RCMP cruiser. And she, in fact, Donna, is the person who provided the picture to the RCMP that we all saw on Twitter and how they got the news out that he was impersonating a police officer. So really critical information from someone who had gone through so much trauma but had managed to escape.
Mercedes, have you been able to discover anything about the firearms used and also how this all came to an end?
So, Donna, we've learned that he had access to a number of firearms, and we don't have an exact number, but I can tell you some of the types of firearms that he had access to. There was a handgun, including a handgun that he stole from Constable Heidi Stephenson after he killed her. He also had access to a rifle and to a shotgun. Police are still trying to figure out how he got those guns and where they came from, but we do know those are the types he had access to. I can tell you in terms of how this all concluded, on the second day, on the Sunday, he was out in the RCMP cruiser. At that point, he ran into the officer who was shot, Officer Morrison, and he shot him while he was driving by that officer's police cruiser. Heidi Stephenson, the constable who died in the line of duty, then hears about the fact that he's in a police car and spots him. My sources say she rammed him. They went off the road. There was an exchange of fire, and he killed her. He then takes her sidearm. He carjacks another car, and that is the silver car we heard about, ends up at a gas station where, by chance, a member of the RCMP emergency response team and one of the K9 officers pull in. They look across. They see the car. They realize it is the gunman. At that point, he reaches for his gun, and the emergency response team member opens fire and kills him.
Mercedes, it had to have been an extremely chaotic and stressful nearly 14 hours for the RCMP. There are lots of questions about why the public was not alerted a gunman was on the loose that night. What does what you've learned reveal about that? Did they think they had him or at least had him contained?
Well, they didn't realize he'd slipped containment until the next day, and they've talked about that. And I think part of when they might have realized that, according to my sources, is that when they realized he might be in a police uniform. And I'm not clear on if they knew exactly where he was before that, but there is certainly concern, and they are looking into whether that police uniform or police car might have helped him escape. Because if you're looking for a gunman, you're not looking for a police officer. So that's certainly part of the investigation they're looking into. They're also looking into the RCMP response. There's questions about training. There's questions about why, as you say, Donna, an alert didn't go out. There was a tweet that went out that referred to a firearms complaint. That didn't quite describe what was happening, which was a mass shooting with fires everywhere. And that potentially could have saved lives. So there's a lot of questions about how all this was communicated. It's a very complex investigation. But on a bit of a more human note, Donna, I can tell you for the officers that were involved in this, I've been told it was extremely traumatic. The crime scenes that they were on were like nothing they've experienced, and there will be a lot of healing to be done in that community.
There sure will. Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks. The RCMP in Nova Scotia did not hold a briefing today. The investigation, as Mercedes says, is still in the early stages. They are mourning one of their own, and there remain many questions. As Ross Lord reports, there are new stories emerging of people grateful they didn't end up in the gunman's path.
The more Nova Scotians learn about the shooter's movements, the more grateful some are that they left the areas he visited just in time.
I was really lucky because thinking about it, this would have been crime scene number 17.
Almost an hour before he was killed in a confrontation with RCMP officers, the suspect appeared to stop his mock RCMP vehicle in a parking lot. He calmly got out to change his clothes, then continued driving up the road. That's what appears to be shown in surveillance video obtained by Global News and originally posted to Facebook on Wednesday, only to be taken down hours later. Minutes before that, the owners of a business at the same location decided to close the shop, having just heard from friends on Facebook about an active shooter in the area.
And I'm grateful that he did, because if an RCMP officer pulled into our parking lot, my father wouldn't have hesitated to go outside to see if he needed help or see if he needed anything.
The gunman had a hit list, according to a man who says police told him he was on it. Nathan Staples reportedly says investigators told him the list was found at a property of the shooter. He guesses the shooter listed him because he refused to sell him a used police car. A New Brunswick man who resells decommissioned RCMP vehicles says the gunman came to him almost 2 years ago looking to make a purchase, describing himself as a retired Mountie.
The reason that he wanted the car was to put on his property to keep the locals from stealing everything out of his cottages.
Audio recordings of first responders shed light on their efforts at Portapic, the first of 16 crime scenes.
RCMP are requesting more ambulances, probably one more coming, and then at least one more standby. It's very vague what's going on down there, but there is for sure multiple patients down there.
I'm currently treating a member in the back of an ambulance.
Nova Scotia RCMP had scheduled a news conference for this evening, but late afternoon they called it off, saying they weren't ready. We're told a news conference is possible tomorrow, the same day as the virtual vigil to remember those killed in this tragedy. Donna.
All right. Ross Lord in Halifax, thanks.